I thought I'd seen everything in life, until I plunged into the world of the ultra-rich. I never felt poor. I had a stable job, my own home, though with a mortgage, and I could afford an annual vacation in Portugal or Italy. Life flowed like it did for most of my acquaintances in Berlin. Work days, a bar on Saturdays, renting a car for the weekend. Overall, a routine without excesses, but also without major upheavals. And suddenly fate threw me into an environment where I realized we ordinary mortals don't even suspect what tricks enormous fortunes are capable of. I'm not talking about luxurious mansions on the Costa Brava or yachts that flash by on social media. It's about expenditures that knock you off your feet because they're so ridiculous and absurd that at first you want to laugh. And then ask, are you kidding? You paid for that nonsense. How did it start? 5 years ago, I worked at a modest consulting firm specializing in lifestyle management, essentially helping wealthy individuals with everyday affairs. It's like a personal assistant, but in the form of an entire team ready to fulfill any whims. At first, I imagined we'd handle reserving tables at cafes, planning celebrations, or managing property. But soon it became clear, the larger the fortune, the more extravagant the caprices. First shock, a home for the dog. My debut assignment seemed harmless. A wealthy family from Ken wanted to hire an architect to build a separate structure for their pet. I thought it meant a doghouse for the dog, but when they showed the sketch, I nearly choked on my tea. It was a genuine two-story miniature castle with a granite spiral staircase, a bathtub for water procedures, and integrated ventilation, precisely for the dog. And the dog was an ordinary Shih Tzu, not some elite breed worth fabulous sums. This venture cost around 2 million euros, and the funniest part, the dog still preferred to sleep in their bed. Private jet because of lunch. A few weeks later, another client from Zurich desired authentic spaghetti from Venice. Not the dish in a restaurant, but specifically from a certain cafe he frequented in his student days. Instead of going there himself, he dispatched a private plane with a pilot to deliver the food back to Austria. Expenses for the round-trip flight, fuel, crew payment, about 25,000 euros. For spaghetti that would cost a maximum of 15 euros in the cafe. I remember how in the office we debated. Would he at least eat them hot or reheat them in the microwave? The wrong shade of bubbly. The most amusing incident happened at a lady's anniversary in Amsterdam. Everything was going perfectly, decorations, lighting, treats. But suddenly she noticed that the champagne was too golden in the photos. Not the taste, not the variety, the shade of the sparkle. She ordered all the bottles to be replaced with another brand. That night, we called all over Amsterdam in search of the right wine. We spent about 120,000 euros just on changing the drink for the sake of impressive shots. And the wildest part, the guests were already so drunk that they didn't care what they were washing it down with. Insurance for sneakers. One young client from Berlin was a fan of his sneaker collection. He had a room resembling an exhibition, lighting, transparent cabinets, alarm system. But he went further. He took out an individual insurance policy exclusively for his shoe collection. The annual premium exceeded the cost of a decent cottage in the suburbs. And what shocked me more, he almost never wore those sneakers. For him, it was a symbol of prestige. Look, I can afford not to use them. When money blurs reality. With each subsequent client, I increasingly realized wealth doesn't leave people ordinary. It distorts their view of the world. For us regular folks, a purchase is always a dilemma. We think, do I need this? Will there be enough for the rest? They have no such dilemma. And when barriers disappear, a person starts buying not just things, but emotions, experiences, even a simple sense of dominance. And one day, I encountered a case that radically flipped my view of wealth. Because observing extravagant spending is one thing, but realizing that behind these fortunes lies something far emptier and more restless is quite another. At a certain point, I understood. Wealthy individuals spend money not on objects, but on the illusion of power over their surroundings. And the larger their fortune, the more fiercely they strive to eliminate any hint of inconvenience. Sometimes it seemed comical and sometimes terrifying. Psychologist for the cat. Once I worked with a couple from Berlin. They had a Persian cat named Felix. The cat lived more luxuriously than many of my friends, special utensils, natural diet, heated bedding. But one day, the owner noted that Felix seems depressed. A week later, the animal had a personal therapist. Sessions were weekly via video because it's less stressful that way. The lady seriously paid a certified specialist over €1,000 per session to work on the emotional balance of her pet. I attended one such session. The expert maintained composure, the hostess described the emotions of the cat, and the doctor advised play methods to eliminate anxiety. I kept thinking, and if this specialist found out that I sometimes seem gloomy too, would he take me at a discount? Park without pincones. Another client from Austria, a gentleman around 60, a former financier. He had a spacious park near his residence in Salzkammergut. Beauty, plantings, neatly trimmed hedges, paths of light gravel. But one day he declared that pinecones on the lawn ruin the view. We hired a team of workers who spent 10 hours a day picking up every pinecone by hand, without gloves because with gloves they don't feel the real texture. The employees wandered with baskets, bending over again and again until they dropped from exhaustion. And the owner sat on the balcony, sipping beer and pointing. There, on the right, you missed one. I tried to persuade him to implement mechanized cleaning or at least a grid, but he snapped. No way, I want people to do it manually. Otherwise, what's the value of my money? That remark stuck in my memory. For him, it wasn't cleaning, but a display of power. Performance because of one song. We had a young client from Berlin, the heiress of a magnate. She adored a certain performer but didn't want to attend the show because too much crowd, smell of sweat, and pushing. Solution, she paid for the musician to come to her home and perform one song. Costs around €400,000, including airfare, accommodation, and fee. $400,000 for listening to a track available for free on streaming. I sat aside and watched as she, in a robe with a glass of beer, enjoyed the live performance. She didn't even clap, just said, "Thank you, that was nice." That's when I first thought, for the wealthy, money truly devalues the significance of moments. Ancient village wedding. But the pinnacle of absurdity was the ceremony we organized in Germany. The groom dreamed that everything resembled the Middle Ages. We rented a castle, built mock-ups of an authentic village around it, hired hundreds of extras, blacksmiths, farmers, traders. Everything had to look as realistic as possible. The guests ate with their fingers, sat on rough benches, and actors played out 14th century life. But what killed me? For the newlyweds, they set up royal apartments with air conditioning, internet, and the latest plumbing. They wanted atmosphere, but without deprivations. The celebration cost over €8 million. And how did it end? A year later, the couple divorced because everyday life turned out blander than their wedding. When money turns into addiction. The longer I delved into this, the more clearly I understood. Money is like a drug. At first, people buy standard things, luxury cars, jewelry, trips. But soon they stop getting a high. They need something new, crazier, more unique. And that's when purchases like insurance for sneakers or psychologist for the cat start. They throw millions to get back even a spark of feeling. But like any addiction, it works less and less. I noticed it in the clients' expressions. Yes, they had residences, yachts, art collections, but alone with themselves, they seemed lost, as if everything built was a grand spectacle and behind the scenes, a vacuum. The most exotic request in my practice. But one episode finally knocked me off track. A client from Berlin called and said, "I need to buy The Taste of Childhood." I didn't get it. In what sense? He explained he had a tough childhood, parents always working, and he never experienced family warmth. Now, owning billions, he wanted to recreate that feeling. We hired actors who played his family, rented a cottage in the village where he spent weekends with loved ones. They cooked meals for him, asked about his affairs, watched movies together. I watched as this mature man in his 40s sat on the sofa, and the mother actress covered him with a blanket. It looked both touching and nightmarish. Because no amount of money can replace real childhood, it was a fake and he knew it, but he still kept paying. My verdict. The more often I encountered such stories, the more firmly I understood. The ultra-rich really can buy everything. Everything except real meaning. They buy homes for dogs, therapists for cats, performances for one song. But all of it is just attempts to patch up inner emptiness.